Our Kaiser Jeep has vintage good looks and a rich military history. But if we're gonna take on the trail, it's gonna need some modern parts. We'll bob the bed, update the suspension, and drop in a Hemi.
We're going to kick things off today by working on our Project LockJaw, the M715 Jeep I pulled out of a local junkyard. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I get a new rig in the shop, I just get excited because the first order of business is to tear it all apart. Now, the first order of business is going to be to bob the bed. That will improve the departure angle of this rig when it's off-road. I won't have this big, long chunk of frame hanging out past the axle center line. Now, there's two steps in doing this. First, I need to cut the frame down. Now, I know that our new leaf spring is 27 inches long from the center of the eyelet to the center pin. So I'm going to add a new rear cross member just ahead of that, probably right here at the 2-foot mark. That will allow me to mount my swing shackle off the new back cross member underneath this frame. The bed, I got something a little different planned. The easiest way to bob this bed, because it's perfectly straight, would be just to cut it off flush with the new rear cross member. But I don't want to do that. See, I really like the look of the back corner of this bed with this mounting hook, the reflector, and this sort of built-out box part. So what I'm going to do instead is basically cut this free from the bed, relocate it closer to the new rear frame section. That way our bed will still look like an original bed. It'll only be about 18 inches shorter. Before I remove the factory rear axle assembly, I'll mark the location for the new frame cross member. Then cut out the factory leaf spring brackets with the torch. The frame is cut using a grinder with a cutoff wheel. A new cross member is then built using some 2 by 3 inch, 1/4 inch wall rectangular steel. And the bottom of the frame is pie cut and bent to meet the new cross member. To relocate the rear box section on the bed, the first step is to cut it apart from the bed and separate it from the bed floor. The side of the bed is then trimmed shorter and the rear corner fit into place. Some grinding on each of the cuts will help line up the new body seams. A hole is cut in the bed side so the factory hold down can be accessed. And holes are drilled in the side of the bed for some plug welds. The corner is fit in place and fully welded. All that's left to do is to trim the leftover bed floor free, and I now have a short bed Jeep M715. Now, there's no body modifications planned for the front of this truck. I kind of like the look of it. All I really will do is build a grill to fill in this opening in the front of the rig, because these trucks did not come from the factory with any type of cosmetic grill on there. I do want to completely remove all the front sheet metal to make rebuilding the front suspension that much easier. Don't dent it. The next order of business will be the suspension. I want to start out with a bare frame rail. So after some cutting, the stock front axle is slid out of the way. The plan for this project is to keep the original style of our M715. Keep it looking like an old truck, but update every part of the drivetrain. Now, when it comes to the suspension, that's a little bit tricky. If I wanted to build a really well-performing off-road rig, I'd link it front and rear and stuff a set of coilovers in there. But that's not going to look right for this truck. What is going to look right is leaf springs all the way around. So I went ahead and got a complete suspension system from BDS Suspension. Now, these are leaves front and rear for a Chevrolet Suburban truck, 73 to 87, because those trucks had leaf springs on all four corners. Even though they're still leaf springs, they're going to flex a lot better than our factory Kaiser springs because they're designed to give a nice soft ride to a lifted truck. At the same time, I had them send me a set of matching Fox 2.0 series shocks. The best key to making a leaf spring suspension work well is to upgrade the shocks, and BDS and Fox work very well together to ensure that the shocks match the leaf springs in the system. Now, these aren't obviously just going to bolt into our Jeep. I had to get some builder kit parts. So I called up Rusty's Off-Road and had them send me a set of universal brackets for all the leaf springs, both front and rear. And now all I have to do is build a whole new suspension system. To start our custom suspension build, I'll need a new front axle. And this Junkyard 2003 Ford F250 high pinion Dana 60 is perfect. In 03, the Super Duty trucks still had leaf springs underneath them, so a perch is cast into the housing. And with it placed on some jack stands underneath the frame, the new BDS leaf springs are dropped into place. This is where building a custom suspension system using leaf springs gets a little bit tricky. Your hands are kind of tied on the location of the actual spring. I can't move the leaf closer to the axle center line to get the mount directly underneath the frame rail, because if I move this spring, I have to move the other side spring, and the differential is in the way. So to mount these springs, I'm going to have to perform what's called outboarding of the spring mounts, basically making all the mounts for the front and rear of the spring and just mounting them the outside edge of the frame rail instead of directly underneath it. The nice thing is that'll help me fine-tune the ride height, because I can move those spring mounts up and down a couple inches just to get everything sitting exactly where I want it. Now, another item that comes into play right now is going to be our shock mount. We unbolted the factory mount, and I have those nice Fox shocks to install. So I had Rusty's Off-Road send me these inboard shock mount kits. Now, this is usually used on a Jeep TJ when you want to move the shocks further into the frame rail to give you a little bit more articulation. But it'll work perfect in this application. I'll just notch it to sit right on top of this frame rail, weld it into place, add a couple tabs onto our shock tube, and we will have a mount for our front shock. I'll start by removing the steering box from the front of the frame. Then trim the frame flush with the factory crossmember. A piece of 2x3 rectangular steel is attached to the front of the frame, checked for level, and tacked into place. The new leaf spring is set into place, and a hole is drilled into the frame to access the upper swing shackle mount. Using a cardboard template as a guide, a gusset is cut and tacked onto the frame. Once the swing shackle is assembled, a second gusset is added for strength. We're removing the underpowered Tornado engine in our Kaiser Jeep, making room for a 5.7 Hemi. To get our Hemi in between the frame rails of our Jeep, I need a motor mount kit, and I got a universal setup from Advanced Adapters. Now, normally when we're installing parts from Advanced Adapters, we're installing Atlas II transfer cases or other drivetrain components. But AA actually got their start in the automotive aftermarket, specializing in drivetrain swaps into a bunch of different vehicles. They have piles of mounting options out there. This is their universal Hemi kit. It comes with a new engine side bracket with multiple mounting holes in it, as well as a frame side bracket that we weld onto the project. It comes with all the hardware and rubber isolators. And the nice thing is we can fine-tune the position of the Hemi in the Jeep thanks to all the different mounting options on the bracket. Just like when building the suspension, to install our new engine mounts, I need to start with a clean frame rail. So all the factory mounts need to be removed and the frame ground smooth. The engine side of the mount is then installed onto the Hemi, and the engine and transmission are lowered into place. The isolators and frame side mounts are bolted onto the engine, and a jack stand is placed under the back of the automatic transmission. The engine is then squared in the chassis, and the mounts are tacked into place. This classic military truck, now it's got a Hemi in it. I'm sure some of you are wondering, since I pulled the front clip off this truck and removed the bed, why didn't I just go ahead and pull the cab off the frame to make building the suspension and installing the drivetrain a lot easier? I mean, it's gonna have to come off anyway to replace the rotten floorboards. But you see, this is not my first rodeo. I knew that I needed the cab in place to make sure the drivetrain was in the right position. Without the cab, I wouldn't know if the top of the motor would clear the hood, which it will. It's low enough for hood clearance, but not so low that it's into the front axle. I also need to know the location of the firewall, and the motor's pushed up against it, but not too tight, just enough for a radiator up front. None of this stuff would be able to be checked without the cab on the truck, and that's what sometimes happens when you're building a vehicle like this, putting in different drivetrains into frames that they weren't designed for. Similar thing happened with some custom fab. I couldn't install these shock mounts onto the frame without the motor in place because I didn't know if they were going to contact the engine or the exhaust. Now that the engine's in here, I can go ahead, finish up the front suspension. The front shock towers are marked and trimmed to fit the frame rail. The tower is then tacked into place. On the axle, a set of simple shock tabs are welded to the tube and the shock is installed. And with that, the majority of the custom fab we need to do to the frame of this project is complete. We now have new suspension, both front and rear, and our motor and transmission are in between the frame rails. I do still need to build a transmission crossmember, but I'm gonna wait until I have the transfer case installed, and that will require me now pulling the cab off of the frame, so that's when I'll fix the floorboards. But so far, I love this truck. We're starting today by working on Project LockJaw, or at least one part of that rig. I'm gonna go ahead and tear apart this 5.7 liter Hemi that we pulled from the junkyard when we saved our M715 from becoming scrap. This motor is questionable on the inside because I think it's been underneath some water. It's out of a flood car. But the only way to find out is to tear it down, have a look, and then rebuild it. Really happy with what we found so far inside this motor. There's no real evidence of water getting down into the cylinders and seizing the engine up. So if this car was actually in a flood, I don't think the water got high enough to come in through the throttle body and seize up the engine. There is a little bit of surface rust in a couple of cylinders, but I think that's actually just from sitting around the wrecking yard, not being in a full-blown flood ruining this motor. We may have gotten a pretty good deal on this engine. Next step in the rebuild, so we'll spin it over, check the bottom end. With the engine rotated and the fluids drained, the oil pan and oil pump pickup are removed. Each connecting rod is marked and the pistons are tapped out of the block. The front of the engine is then disassembled, starting with the water pump. To help remove the harmonic balancer, a little WD-40 rust release penetrant will help break it free. Next are the alternator, timing cover, timing chain, and crank and cam gear. Finally, the lifter retainers and roller lifters are removed, followed by the camshaft. With the engine completely disassembled, I am very happy with what I've found. There's no real major issues. The majority of the cylinders are in such good shape, you can still see the crosshatch pattern in them, and all the bearings look good when they came off the crank. There's still one problem area, and that is this rear cylinder that I thought just had a little bit of surface rust. It's got something that's a little bit deeper than that, so I think the answer to fix that is still going to be to take the engine to our local machine shop and have that addressed. While I'm there, I'll also have them check the cylinder heads that came off this engine. And the cylinder heads on a Hemi, that's what makes it very unique. The term Hemi is short form for hemispherical, and it's referring to the shape of the combustion chamber inside the cylinder head. It's basically half of a perfect sphere. Now, this provides a very smooth transition for the fuel and air that comes into the intake valve and then is burned inside the combustion chamber to then exit through the exhaust. It's very easy for the fuel and air to move around. Now, the old school style Hemis had one single spark plug, and it was right in between that intake and exhaust valve. These modern Hemis actually have 2 plugs per cylinder. Now, this just optimizes the burning of the fuel and air inside the combustion chamber to give us good power and help with emissions. And when you compare it to an older style combustion chamber, you can easily see the difference. You can see the intake and the exhaust, yes, they're right beside each other, but the fuel and air charge takes a rather different path from one valve to the next, and the plug is actually angled away from the intake valve. That can cause what's called shrouding of that intake charge, less efficient burn, and that is why you always make a lot more power with a Hemi style combustion chamber. Now, these heads look to be in great shape, but since we're taking the block down to the local machine shop, it just makes sense to take the heads as well. Our local machine shop is Shacklett's Auto Machine in Nashville, Tennessee, a full-service engine machine shop that can handle any type of machine work, from cylinder head rebuilding, crank polishing, decking, and boring and honing. And after looking at the engine block that we brought in, we knew that our engine was in good hands.
We're going to check it all out, make sure that the block can be honed or bored and honed, redo the cylinder heads, and probably put valve seats in all 16 to make sure they don't fall out. A lot of the Chryslers have a problem with the valve seats falling out.
And while the crew at Shacklett's Auto Machine work on our Hemi parts, we'll go ahead and clean up the oil pan and oil pump pickup, and then we can start painting. We'll use Duplicolor engine enamel. What color? Chrysler Hemi Orange. It's designed to withstand temperatures up to 500 degrees, and it's resistant to oil and fluids. Perfect for our engine. A couple days have passed and everything is back from the machine shop and looks great. Now, Shacklett's went ahead and completely rebuilt both cylinder heads. They surfaced them, gave them a 3-angle valve job, all new seals. And if you remember, there was some concern about the valve seats in those aluminum Hemi heads, but it ends up at some point in time, Chrysler upgraded those seats from the factory, and when they tore those heads down, they found the bigger seats already installed. So those are good to go. The block, they cleaned it up. They did have to punch it 20 over on all 8 cylinders. That's perfect. Now we have a good starting point. They pulled all the oil gallery plugs out, pressure washed and cleaned the whole block. This is ready to be rebuilt. For that, we need some new parts. Now, I got a complete engine rebuild kit all from rockauto.com. Comes with all the gaskets, bearings, new oil pump, piston rings, and even came with 8 pistons. Now, these have already been installed on our original connecting rods because I dropped them off with the block at the machine shop. And that's something you're going to have to plan for. If you take your motor apart and you see that the pistons are actually pressed onto the rods, you can't change those at home. That has to be done at the machine shop. But right now, this motor is ready to be rebuilt, and then I'm going to have a brand new engine. First step in the rebuild is to install the new main bearings into the engine block and apply some Royal Purple Max Tough assembly lube. This prevents bearing metal-to-metal contact during the initial startup. The crankshaft is then installed and the main bearing caps are torqued. Before torquing, the caps are set in place with a dead blow hammer to make sure that they are seated properly. After torquing to spec, the main bearing caps require an additional 90 degrees of rotation. Using a torque angle gauge ensures precise, consistent rotation on all of the bolts. Piston rings are assembled onto the pistons with the gaps staggered 180 degrees apart. Rod bearings are placed onto the connecting rods, and the pistons installed into the block, and the rod bolts are then torqued. The camshaft, timing set with the timing marks aligned, timing chain tensioner, and lifters are dropped into place, followed by the oil pump and the oil pump pickup. The head gaskets are a multi-layered steel design and labeled to ensure correct orientation during installation. The cylinder heads are dropped onto the block, torqued down following the correct sequence, followed by the push rods and rocker arms. The timing cover, water pump, and oil pan finish up the engine block assembly. Now, our engine is basically a factory refresh, but that doesn't mean we can't throw a few goodies at it. There was an issue with our exhaust when we mocked everything up in the frame. This manifold that was on our engine, you can see it dumps the exhaust straight back, basically right into our Jeep's firewall. So instead of digging around for another manifold that might be a little bit better, I'm going to upgrade the system to a set of tubular exhaust headers. Now, these are from Gibson Exhaust, and they're designed to fit a 5.7 liter Hemi in a Chrysler car, like a 300C or a Challenger. Now, not only will they give me a better location for the exhaust to exit, they are 100% stainless construction and then ceramic coated. That will help keep the underhood temperatures in check. The tubular design will help improve flow and give us more power. So now it'll be easier to build a custom exhaust and we'll have more power out of our engine. The new exhaust headers bolt straight onto the heads with a new gasket and the included fasteners. And now we have a completely rebuilt 5.7 Hemi ready to put some power into our classic Jeep M715. We have made really good progress on Project LockJaw. What started as literally a truck that was thrown away in the trash has been reborn into a hardcore off-road cab truck. Now, the chassis is almost 100% done, and the body is pretty much ready to be dropped back on because I'm going to be leaving it this nice old patina look on the outside. But there's just a couple of things that'll be easier to take care of with the body still off it, and that is where we start today. First order of business will be a complete custom exhaust. Ours will be built using a Gibson Superflow stainless steel muffler. The baffled and chambered design allows for maximum efficiency, and the offset inlet and outlet make for excellent ground clearance and easy installation. Universal stainless steel collectors and 45-degree 2.5-inch pipe are cut to fit with the Gibson headers. Once aligned, the tubing is cut and tacked together with the TIG welder. It goes back into the chassis, and to make it removable, V-band clamps are added to the system. On a four-wheel drive rig, the exhaust is always tricky when you're dealing with the side that the transfer case output is on. So you got to remember, there's going to be a drive shaft coming from the transfer case all the way down through here to the front axle. I can't simply add another downpipe here and a muffler. It'll get in the way. Now, there's a couple of ways to deal with it. I have to get the exhaust to the other side of the frame. I could almost pull a 180, flip the exhaust all the way around to the front side of the oil pan and carry it over. But because I'm dealing with a leaf sprung rig there, I don't have so much up travel. I only have to limit it about 4 inches. So I have room to simply bring the exhaust down, put it underneath the transmission on this side. I'll have plenty of clearance for the drive shaft, and I'll hook it up into a 2-in-1 system. The crossover pipe is installed onto the header the same as the passenger side. Once the clocking is marked with a Sharpie, the exhaust is removed and tacked together. The exhaust is set back into place, and once located underneath the transmission, a piece of pipe is ground to saddle over the passenger side pipe at a 45-degree angle. It's tacked into place, removed from under the chassis. The location of the pipe is marked and then cut. Finally, it's fully welded, and the exhaust goes back into the chassis. An exhaust tip and muffler hangers finish up the installation. With the body still off the frame, this is a perfect time just to take care of some odds and ends. I can go ahead and mount all the fuel lines as well as the new fuel pump onto our frame rail. I'm using this Holley EFI billet pump to feed our V8. I can also run the line for our air lockers and even install the electrical cable for our rear mounted battery. The reason it's easier with the body off is because it's just easier to mount stuff to the frame, keep it secure. You don't have to worry about it coming loose and possibly touching either a rotating part or that new exhaust and having a failure when we're on the trail. On any off-road rig, it's a good idea to extend the differential vent tubes. This is also a good time to install the vent tubes on the transfer case and the transmission. I like to zip tie the air locker feed lines to the differential vent tubes just to help keep them secure. The fuel pump will be mounted inside the C-channel frame to protect it while it's on the trail, and the fuel line is secured using some cushion clamps. The ground strap for the rear-mounted battery is secured directly to the frame rail after removing the paint to provide a good quality ground. Brake lines are made from some 3/16" steel hardline, and double-flared tube nuts are installed onto each end. Finally, the brake lines are clamped to the frame using some clamps from Summit Racing. Plumbing is all finished up. We're ready to drop the bed onto the frame, mount the fuel cell, finish hooking up our fuel lines. But before I do that, there's just one last little bit of custom fabrication that'll be easier to take care of with everything up and out of the way. LockJaw is a rear leaf-sprung suspended truck, and when you're wheeling a leaf-sprung rig, there is a tendency to pick up what's called axle wrap. Now that happens when the transmission and transfer case are in low gear and you got lots of traction off-road, which won't be a problem with these red label crawlers. The torque from the engine can actually cause the differential to twist on the leaf springs, basically pushing it up in the air at the front. Now the problem with that is there's two issues. The first is it bends the leaf springs and it can actually end up breaking one of these leaves. It can also put the driveline in such a bind that it'll break the U-joint and you'll be dead on the trail. Now to prevent that, we're gonna build what's called an anti-wrap bar. It's basically gonna lock in off the pinion guard and the top of the truss and travel forward to a cross member. That won't limit the axle articulation or suspension movement when we're off-road, but it will prevent that differential housing from twisting and we won't have any issues. A cross member needs to be added to the M715's frame for the anti-wrap bar. The front swing shackle assembly is tacked into place, and the length of the anti-wrap bar is measured. A poly bushing tube is tacked onto one end of the wrap bar, and the opposite end with a 3/4 inch heim is attached to the swing shackle. The pinion support is then modified to accept our new anti-wrap bar with an additional tab to provide a double shear mount. Tabs for the upper mount are added to the top of the truss, and the upper tube is attached to the lower anti-wrap bar. The upper and lower mount will lock the axle housing in place, prevent it from twisting, but we do not want to limit the suspension movement. That's why we use the swing shackle at the front of the anti-wrap bar. If we mounted this joint solid, it would prevent the leaf spring from moving up and down. But by using the swing shackle, as the suspension compresses, it can swing forward, and as the leaf springs drop out, it'll swing back. And that won't limit our suspension movement when we're off-road. By using a Heim joint at the front of the bar, it also allows for a good amount of articulation. Now, a lot of guys like to mount these anti-wrap bars right out here on the side of the frame rail, but when I have a 14 bolt, I like to move it to the inside and use the pinion guard as the lower mount, because you have to remember, I'm going to have a drive shaft going from this yoke up to the yoke at the transfer case. And by installing the anti-wrap bar right in that location, what I've basically added to this rig is a drive shaft skid plate. If a big rock gets up underneath this frame, instead of hitting the drive shaft, it'll hit this anti-wrap bar. I can drag the truck down it and keep heading down the trail. I've already told you that the plan is to leave the patina on the exterior of this truck all alone. This is a good 50 years worth of wear, and the truck has earned this style. Now, inside the bed, it's a little bit different. I plan to use this truck when I'm on the trail, so I want to make it easier to maintain and keep clean. But before I go ahead and spray a good coating of truck bed liner in here, there's a little bit of fab work I want to take care of for goodies that I'm going to need on the trail. The first step is to simply lay out everything I'm going to need to have in the back of the truck, starting with a Summit Racing 20-gallon aluminum fuel cell, ARB dual air compressor that will be used to energize our air lockers, but the dual compressor also provides enough air to inflate tires and run air tools. Rusty's off-road battery box to secure an Optima battery. ARB fridge to keep food and drinks cold on long trail rides, and some swag off-road lockable ammo cans for storage. Then a quick test fit onto the frame. With the bed mocked into place, I can already see I may have to move a few of the items I've just set in there. That's why I put them in right now, put on the frame before I mounted anything. The first is gonna be the fuel cell. Sure, I could just cut a little hole for these outlets and drop the cell flush to the bed floor, but I got something a little bit cooler planned. It's gonna require recessing the fuel cell into the bed and making it work with our new spare tire mount. With the dimensions of the fuel cell marked onto the bed floor, all four corners are first cut with a hole saw. That makes room for the Sawzall blade to trim out the entire floor. The new drop floor plates are made from 1/8" steel plate that is plasma cut and bent 90 degrees on both ends. The sides are then measured, cut, and tacked into place. After prepping the truck bed, both sides of the new drop floor are tacked into place. The cell fits snugly into position, and the Summit Racing filler neck replaces the factory cap. The spare tire plate is cut to fit around the filler neck for our new fuel tank. It's ground smooth and attached to the underside of the tire. By sinking the fuel cell down into the bed of the truck, I now have a good angle for the fuel filler that I've now mounted inside the center of our spare tire mount. It's a real clean trick look that you normally don't see on off-road trucks. I've basically hidden the fuel filler inside the spare wheel. With the wheel and tires suspended by the engine crane, temporary mounts are used to hold the spare tire mounting plate in place. The wheel and tire is then removed. 1.25" DOM is cut and trimmed to fit. Plates that will tie into the truck's frame and future roll cage are dropped onto the bed, and the assembly is fully welded. Now all that's left to do is to pull the fuel cell back out, finish weld that drop panel that I put in place, then I'll pull the bed back off of the frame and get it ready for a good coat of bed liner. The fab work, at least on the back half of the truck, all done. With the cab sitting back on the frame for Project LockJaw, the next step is to jump inside, finish out the floors, and build a roll cage. But there's one thing that's been bugging me on this rig ever since we picked it up, and that is the roof line. I like the height of this side window. I don't like how the front windshield kind of jumps up a good 3-4 inches and goes across the top. So, before I start on the cage, the first thing I'm gonna do is chop the top. First step, get the windshield frame off of the truck and onto a table. The original glass is cracked and no good, so it has to go. Then 3.5 inches are cut out of the frame. The sides of the frame are at an angle, so the top will get wider when it's cut down. The center is stretched to the new width. Now the windshield can be tacked up, but first it needs some extra support from a piece of 1-inch square steel to keep it good and straight. A quick test fit onto the truck to check the height, and it can be removed to fully weld, grind it smooth, and hit each weld with some OD green paint. The next piece of body work I have to do to this truck is finish my floor replacement. Now, if you remember when we had the cab up off the frame, I went and built all new flat floor sections on both sides of the truck because the stock floor had rotted completely away. Now, since then, I built the top of the transmission and transfer case tunnel, and I built it the same as the floor using this 1-inch cold rolled electric weld square tubing and capped it with some 16-gauge steel. I now need to make the sides for this tunnel, and then I can go ahead and weld everything in place, seam seal all the joints, pull the cab back off the frame, and get it ready for a good coat of paint. The remainder of the floors are also 16-gauge steel, and once cut to fit, they are put into place and welded every 8 to 10 inches using a stitch welding technique. This series of tack welds limits the heat input into the material and helps eliminate warpage in the panels. The welds are then ground smooth, and the tube structure that was originally added to secure our cab's shape can finally be removed. The cab is pulled off the chassis and set on its back to finish up the underside of the floor. Excess factory floor is cut off, and the seams are also stitch welded. Not all of the body work that I have to do with our cab has to do with rust. There's one section of the firewall that I need to replace because at some point in time, someone cut a hole, or rather half of a hole into the firewall. For what reason, we'll never know. The reason I need to fix it is because I want to mount something in the location of that hole. This is a small universal heater system from Summit Racing. Now it accepts 2 heater hoses from the engine that'll pump warm engine coolant through a small heater core inside. It has 2 outlets that'll blow nice warm air into the cabin of our M715 pickup truck when we're out on the trail. Now it's universal fit and just mounts onto a flat firewall, so I need a place to mount it. And I need this because where we plan to take this truck on its maiden voyage, well, it could be chilly. Once the heater is measured against the firewall, it's as easy as cutting and patching with some 16-gauge steel. With all the fab work finished up on our cab, before I drop it onto the frame for good and start final assembly, I want to give it a coat of bed liner both underneath and inside on our new floors. Now I'm going to use a product called Raptor Liner, and it uses this siphon type spray gun, often referred to as a Schutz gun. Now it's a professional type product, so you get it at an automotive supply house, and because it's a professional type product, there are some fumes involved with it. So make sure that you got good personal protection, rubber gloves, glasses, respirator, and work in a well-ventilated area. Or if you have it, fire up your prep booth. To spray the liner, it's as simple as adding the hardener to the bottle and shake for 2 to 3 minutes to ensure full activation. The siphon gun is then attached onto the bottle, and it's time to start spraying. The liner provides good coverage, and the textured coating gives a nice finished surface. Once the bottom of the cab and firewall are completely covered, I move on to the interior floor, and lastly, give the inside of the bed a coat as well. Then the bed and cab are dropped back onto our chassis for the last time. Before the front sheet metal goes on, this is the perfect time to take care of a few odds and ends, mainly the wiring. That way I'm not leaning over the fenders, standing on my head, trying to hook things up. Now for the main wiring harness for Project LockJaw, I don't want a factory replacement harness. I don't need that. I need something a little bit more universal. Now I got this universal extreme duty off-road harness from Summit Racing. Now it only has 10 circuits in it, but inside the water resistant fuse block, there's also 4 relays already wired up and already mounted. Now the nice thing about this is it's going to give us just enough circuits for everything we need on this truck. Things like off-road lights, our compressor in the back, and the power we need to run our engine, but not all that extra stuff that you'd find with a pre-made harness, because I don't need things like cruise control. LockJaw don't got it. The fuse box and circuit breakers are attached to the firewall, and the harness is routed to the inside of the cab, as well as feeds left under the hood for the engine. I'm just loosely running the main harness around to different spots on the truck so it can hook up to all the items we need to make LockJaw run. One of those main items is going to be a complete engine wiring harness and computer. Now I got this set up from Hotwire Auto, and it is actually the factory wiring harness that was on our engine when it came from the junkyard. Hotwire took it, completely cleaned it all up, added new connectors where needed, and then sheathed it all with new wire loom coating. Now this is what's called their hot rod harness. They've basically completely removed any factory vehicle settings on it, and it can be hooked up to just a constant power, a switched power, and some grounds, and it will run. Now the key to that is reflashing the factory ECU. Now this is the computer that came with our engine. It has everything we need to make our engine run, and more importantly, also has the controls in place for our fully electronic automatic transmission. Now there will just be a few connections made from this harness into our truck's main harness, and then this engine will be ready to roll. The harness is fully plug and play. Each sensor is clearly marked, and the ECU is mounted under the dash on the passenger side of the truck. Now the front clip can be installed, and we'll pull the weak stock headlights out for a couple of upgrades. Everything about LockJaw is old and worn out on the outside with modern technology underneath where it counts, and the lighting is not going to be any different. I got a whole bunch of stuff here, all from Firewire LED, one of their large 50-inch dual combo spot and flood LED bars. We'll mount that up on the windshield. A set of their aluminum water-resistant rock lights. These have 3 1-watt LEDs inside of them. We'll mount them up above each tire and wheel. And we're going to ditch those worn-out sealed beams up front and upgrade it using an LED light conversion kit with new housings. And now we've got bright lights for some serious wheeling. When it comes time to take a rig out on its maiden voyage, I get pretty excited. I'm even more excited about where we're taking LockJaw for its first trail ride. Later today, we're gonna throw it on a trailer, drive all the way out to Moab, Utah, to the Easter Jeep Safari, and hit some trails in our classic M715. There's a couple things I need to take care of before we do that, though. The first is a full roll cage. To build this cage, I'm gonna be breaking out a new tool that we just got in the Extreme Shop. This is a new rotary draw type bender that we've got from Edwards Manufacturing. It's equipped with a 10-ton hydraulic ram to make bending thick tube easy. But the cool part about this setup is instead of using a standalone hydraulic pump and valve assembly, it connects directly to our ironworker and uses the pump inside it to control our bender. The cage will be built using some 1 3/4 120 watt DOM tubing, and it starts with 2 main kickers that travel from the windshield frame back into the bed, tying into our rear spare tire mount that we built earlier. The cage for LockJaw is going to be a little bit different than you'd normally see guys build on these M715 trucks. A lot of the times when they're putting aftermarket cages in this body style, they try to mimic the factory design. If you remember, this truck had kind of like a big covered wagon roof, and so they'll put a big B-pillar hoop in the back. The problem with that is it kind of makes the truck look tall, and I'm trying to lower the overall visual height of this rig. That's why I chopped the windshield frame. My plan is a fastback cage, a flat roof that'll kick back into the bed. I'm also gonna tie the cage in to specific points of the body, kind of like a new modern Jeep. I'll put a plate up here at the windshield frame like you'd see in a JK, basically lock it together. That'll help stiffen up the body, but more importantly, it'll also work well with the soft top I got planned for this rig. A front crosser connects the 2 kickers together at the windshield. Rear crosser is tacked into place, and roof bars are added to give the truck a flat roof, finishing up our fastback look. Floor plates are bolted into place, and B-pillar bars are recessed into the body for more room inside the cab. Now, I am not an upholsterer by any means, but I have an idea for the soft top on this rig. I just want something to keep the sun and the rain off us when we're out wheeling. I went down to the local Army surplus store and picked up one of these olive drab canvas tarps. Now, it'll tie in really well with the old theme we got going with our truck. Now, the plan is to tie it in off the windshield frame, parts of our new cage, and the original door surrounds. I have no idea if this is going to work or not, so we're in this ride together. With the tarp draped over the cage and attached to the windshield frame, it is trimmed around the door openings and the back of the cage. Clamps and flat bar lock the top onto the factory door surrounds. With the tarp mocked into position, I'm really happy with how it's laying across the cage. Now, it's not going to be a removable soft top. It'll be permanently anchored to the windshield frame, the door surrounds, and the back of the cage, but it'll do its job. It'll keep the sun off us and rain off us when we're out wheeling. I can now strip it off and completely weld in all the tubing of our roll cage. While I'm at it, I'll add some seat mounts for our suspension seats. Now, these are PRP daily driver seats. Now, they're a good, comfortable suspension seats with high bolt bolsters will give us good, easy containment, keep us nice and safe when we're out wheeling. Now I had them go ahead and cover the seats in a black vinyl with gray piping, tweed on the outside, and then in the center insert, I switched it up and went with a ballistic nylon cover, because in an ex-military truck, it just seems right to use the word ballistic. There's just a few items left on our punch list to finish up Project LockJaw. The first is to finish out the cooling system. Now I needed a radiator that would fit underneath our hood and work with our V8 engine, and nobody makes a Hemi swap radiator specifically for the M715 Jeep. Now Summit Racing does have this radiator available. This is a Hemi swap radiator for a Jeep JK. It's a thick cord, all aluminum radiator, and includes an electric fan and shroud. Because it's designed to work with the Hemi, the inlet and the outlet are on the right side. And since it's for a Jeep JK, I'm fairly certain that we'll be able to fit this radiator under the hood of our Jeep with minimum modification. The radiator comes with all the necessary brackets to bolt it into a Jeep JK. Since we're not working with the JK, we'll modify our classic Jeep to work by drilling a hole, installing a grommet to act as a radiator cushion. For the upper mounts, we'll just drill into the front of the shell and use a simple L bracket to lock it all into place. Next item under the hood is an air filter system. I'm going to build my own intake kit using a U-Build It kit from Air. A roto-molded intake tube has multiple angles available, and once the location of the reusable air filter element is found, the tube is cut to fit and connected using the included clamps and connectors. If you ever see a classic military M715, the first thing you'll notice is a huge winch hanging off the front of the frame. Now, someone had already stripped the one off this truck probably long before it went to the scrapyard, and there's no way we're going all the way to Moab, Utah without a good quality winch to replace it on the front of this rig. And what better than the classic Warn 8274 winch? Now, this winch has been used for decades, and off-roaders still love it for a couple of key reasons. It has 150 feet of 5/16 aircraft cable. Now, that'll give you a good long line pull. It's an incredibly fast winch. It'll recover that line at almost 80 feet per minute. And it has this vertical design, which gives you a good set of spur gears inside this oil bath housing, keeps the motor up out of the way, allows air to circulate, keeps everything good and cool. Not only does it have that vintage look, but it's also all business, capable of pulling 8,000 pounds on a single line pull, and that'll be perfect on the front of our rig. The winch mounting plate is built using 1/4-inch flat steel. Mounting holes are punched using our iron worker, and the opening for the cable is cut with the plasma cutter. With the winch and fair lead bolted into place, the assembly is mocked up onto the front of the truck using the engine crane. Side plate templates are made from cardboard, cut, and then tacked into place. The bottom plate is also 1/4-inch steel and will act as a skid plate for the front of the truck and has openings cut into it to allow for drainage. The winch mounted in the middle of the truck all by itself is very similar to what you'd see in a classic M715. But since we're taking this rig wheeling, I want to deal with some of this sheet metal that's on the outside edge of the frame. It's just in a bad spot. It's going to be very easy for a rock to get caught up in here and keep us from moving down the trail. Now, one option would be to get out some DOM and build a round pre-runner style tube bumper to protect all of it. But a round tube bumper isn't going to look right on this truck. Instead, a square tube bumper is going to look right. And the cool thing is my new bender can actually bend 1/4-inch wall square tubing. With everything tacked into place, the winch is then removed, and the entire assembly is fully welded inside and out. The truck is up on the lift one last time. I'll nut and bolt everything, fill all the fluids, and then toss it on a trailer and head out to Moab, Utah. Before I do that, I need to bolt in both the front and rear drive shaft. Now, our shafts are custom units from JE Reel Driveline. It's a thick-walled DOM shaft with 1350 joints at either end. I don't have any severe driveline angles on this truck, so I didn't have to opt for a constant velocity joint at the transfer case. Now, if you do remember, our transfer case didn't come with any yokes, and the guys at JE Reel helped us out by sending us these yokes for our case. They're for the 205 32 spline, and they fit a 1350 U-joint. But they do offer these same yokes all the way up to a 1480 if you're building something that needs a bomb-proof setup. With the yokes and drive shafts installed, it's time to add fluid to the axle and the transfer case. Drop the truck down, fire up the engine, and head out of the shop. Next stop, Moab, Utah. Time to go! We are deep in the slick rocks of Moab, Utah at the 49th annual Easter Jeep Safari with Project LockJaw, seeing how our classic M715 Junkyard find handles some serious trails. Breakdowns are always a threat out here, and the remoteness of the trails makes mechanical failure a little more serious. I found that out on the next climb, Rock Chucker, a steep, rocky section that caused the front axle to wrap and rip the caps off the front axle yoke. If we wanted to keep wheeling, or even just get back to the trailhead, this had to be fixed. 1350, here's a cap, Shannon. You going wheeling now or what? With the driveline repaired, our group continued through Metal Masher for the remainder of the day, hitting ledges whenever we could, and occasionally taking a break to get some pics of the Utah landscape. We were having a blast in our rig, and we asked some of our fellow wheelers what they thought of our classic Jeep.
Absolutely fantastic. It's a great package. I really like seeing the old metal there, along with the new technology that you've put into it with the new motor and the air lockers, new axles, and all the other gear that you've packed in the back of the bed.
The last obstacle on Metal Masher is an optional climb up a series of slick rock ledges called the Widowmaker. A seriously steep section that is bypassed by most. But after braking on Rock Chucker, LockJaw had to redeem itself. So I pointed it at the climb, rolled up on the rock. Right away it was obvious that crawling this obstacle was not going to be an option. But with a little help from the Hemi under the hood, the red label crawlers, and a whole pile of throttle, LockJaw pulled itself up the Widowmaker, the most difficult obstacle on the trail. One of the most intriguing rigs on the trail today was this 1958 FC170 Jeep, a SEMA show truck that generated tons of buzz and landed on dozens of best of show lists. But the best thing about it, it's nobody's trailer queen.
You know, I would say wheel the heck out of it, but yes, we do wheel it, which I think shocks people because it is beautiful, but at the same time, you gotta use what you build.
Now, our truck is never gonna win a best of show trophy, but we are really proud of the fact that we saved this rig from the scrapyard. It's hard to believe that less than 4 months ago, this retired military classic was headed to the crusher to be cubed and turned into scrap metal. And now it's cruising the red rocks of Moab, Utah during Easter Jeep Safari. We are very proud to see this rig brought back from the brink of destruction. And now it's sitting on top of the world.